John Hankey, independent researcher and investigator out of Los Angeles. He'll give you some more on his background, and he's doing a little slideshow. He's done work on other political assassinations. He did groundbreaking work on the murder of Gary Webb, and on John F. Kennedy Jr.'s death, and on Paul Wellstone, and other scenarios. So, and he's probably going to talk about George Bush or the Bush family. He likes them.
That'll probably happen. John told me I should count on 20 minutes, so that what I have on slides I can get through in 20 minutes. I don't have anything in here on Gary Webb, but I'd be happy to touch on that, and we can go into it as deep as anybody wants to. And Paul Wellstone ties in, but it's fairly brief. I wanted to quickly say that I teach history. I've taught history for 20 years in LA Unified and in the inner city, and my students don't know anything, but they're brilliant, so they're just wonderful to have in discussions. And I think that this stuff goes back a long ways, and if anybody's inclined, we can talk for a while about the Pope and the incredible hoaxes that the Pope has perpetrated on the people of Christendom, if we can use that term. Abraham Lincoln ran for Congress and got elected, and when the slave owners started the Mexican-American War on the pretext, said Lincoln, that the Mexican army had attacked the U.S. Army on American soil, Lincoln stood up and challenged the basis of that war, and he said, I think you're lying, and I want to see the spot. He introduced something called the spot resolution, and like Cynthia McKinney, and like Wayne Morse, and like Senator Groening, and like Senator Church, they, the opposition, who were the moneyed people, right, the slave owners were the moneyed people in the country, just poured money into the coffers of the opposition, and he didn't get reelected to the House. He ran for Senate. Slave owners poured money in, and he lost the run for the Senate. He lost the run for the Senate twice, I think, and then ran for president on the Republican ticket. So Cynthia McKinney and nobody else should feel bad about losing for the right reason. They stand in a long line of really important people. I wanted to throw out really quickly, I said this is not new stuff. Lincoln's main enemy, and he said that he feared the bankers more than he feared the slave owners. During the Civil War, he said that he feared the bankers. He said that I got the slave owners fighting me in the front and the bankers in my rear, and I'm more afraid of the bankers. The most famous banker that he had in his rear was Samuel Chase, that Chase Manhattan Bank is named for. We're not fighting different guys. This is very much the same stuff. I got a couple of videos, JFK to the Bush connection and the assassination of JFK Jr., and I've taken a leave from teaching, so I don't have an income. Please feel free to buy one of these. You can also see them for free on Google if you're so inclined, and I'd encourage you to do that. You can get them at Amazon, and I'd encourage you to do that. You can also get them from my website, which is bushkilljfk.com.
Can you lower the projector?
I can probably lower the projector.
Yeah, put it on top of that thing. If you move your stuff off of there,
oh, okay.
then you
That's
can
how
put your
sure.
You need these papers.
No, I don't. Just
don't.
move them out.
Okay. And then you can put this back down on here.
Okay. Well, we may now have to raise it. No, that'll work. That'll work. Okay. Well, let's move on. I got a bar here for some reason. The way that I started on this, the morning that John Kennedy Jr., the morning after his plane crashed at 9:39 at night, 9:40 I suppose, and the next morning at 7 o'clock in the morning I was on my way to a conference of teachers, and I heard on the radio that John Kennedy Jr.'s plane was missing, and I'm not a religious guy, but I said a prayer for him, and I mean, I'm an atheist, but I said a prayer for him. And went on my way to the conference and was involved with all these, really fired up people on all these important issues. And I forgot about it. And I came home and my wife said, let's go out to eat. We went to our favorite Thai restaurant in L.A. and we sat down and ordered the food. And I looked up, and there's Dan Rather on the television supervising the news reporting. And some of you are, I'm sure, familiar with Rather. He was the only newsman for 25 years who was allowed to see the Zapruder film. And there's 2,000 reporters in Dallas the day of the assassination, and they hear that there's a video, and an 8mm film of the assassination, and they hear that they don't get to hear it, and they just go nuts. Well, you killed him, right? If you're not going to let us see it, you must have killed him. And so the FBI made a deal. We will let one of you see it, and then he will come out and tell everybody that it says what we say it says. And Rather went in and came out and reported. And you can actually, it's on the internet if you look. You can hear his voice giving the report that the president's head clearly jerked forward, and of course all of you who have seen the Zapruder film know that that's not the truth. So when I saw Rather on the screen with pretty much that picture, I became physically ill. They brought this wonderful food and I couldn't eat. I was just overwhelmed with my gut telling me they killed him. And I sat there thinking about, well, why do I feel so terribly horrible about it? And I sat there thinking about it and about how Rather had supervised to a very large extent in the information that came out about the Kennedy assassination Sr. And when the reason that I felt so sick was that when they killed John Kennedy Sr., they in very rapid succession killed Malcolm X, and then Martin Luther, and then Bobby, and then dozens of Panthers. I mean, people are talking about martial law. Well, the Black Panthers have done the worst thing that you can possibly imagine, I think. Right? They didn't even get a chance to go to concentration camps. Right? They got wiped out in their beds in the street. And then 50,000 U.S. troops, and then 2 million, by many estimates, Vietnamese and Cambodians and Southeast Asians. And my gut was telling me this is coming. And Gary Webb was murdered, and Paul Wellstone was murdered, and nearly 3,000 U.S. troops have been, let's say, murdered. I mean, come on, right? How is that not murder? And right, the latest estimate of the Lancet, the British medical magazine, is 600,000 Iraqis. So that was my beginning with this, and I really have been possessed by this topic for 6 years, and although I'm feeling much relieved at the moment, but until I got this video done, I couldn't let it go. One of the main topics that, if people were paying attention to it, I mean, a lot of people were disturbed by the news that John Kennedy Jr. was dead, and one of the main topics that immediately came to people's attention, and there was considerable discussion about it on the internet, was that there was no search and there was no rescue. There was this incredible delay, and I'm going to deal with those topics not necessarily in chronological order, but hopefully in a somewhat logical order. The first easiest thing to talk about is that every private and military plane, for that matter, is required to carry what's called an ELT, an emergency locator transmitter. The military and the civilians have a very complex and sophisticated system. If you crash your plane they have to triangulate it, and they may have to wait for the satellites to move before they can triangulate, although his plane went down in one of the busiest corridors on the face of the earth, so it's not likely that they had to wait. They should have known instantly exactly the location that his plane went down. There's nothing in the NTSB report, there's no mention of the ELT virtually. There's certainly no mention of why there was no ELT report. I talked to the manufacturer of the ELT. He said if the ELT malfunctioned, we were supposed to be notified. There's supposed to be a hearing to determine why it malfunctioned, and we're supposed to make an accounting and either explain ourselves and be excused, or we're going to have to revise our manufacturer. We didn't get notified. I told him what the report said. He said, to me, that said that the battery had been worn down, right? It was 1.4 volts or whatever. And he said, well, that would seem to indicate that it was working, because the battery wouldn't be worn down unless it was working. So apparently the ELT went off, and ABC News showed that the ELT went off, right? Throughout this case, you find that the news people had the information. I mean, people in this community and in general, I think, tend to kick reporters in the ass and complain about the media. You would have been proud of the reporters at the press conference at the Pentagon. They went after these guys, and I mean, it changed my attitude towards reporters, that there's a lot of really, really good reporters who give a lot of really, really good information. Tom Weicker on the front page of the New York Times, the afternoon of the assassination, got published saying throat wounds, wound on the left temple, huge hole in the back of the head. All of this stuff was in the front page of the New York Times because Weicker got it in there, and it was subsequently buried anyhow. The reporters did a good job, and that is one of the things that appeared on the press. So the question is, what happened to the ELT report? That's one aspect of it. All the reports that the plane was missing were ignored by the FAA. The FAA and the Air Force in a conspiracy to commit crimes? Well, for example, just quickly, there's a guy, Adam Budd, and he's a good scout. There were people waiting for the plane to land. They said, the plane hasn't landed, what's up? At 10 o'clock, they went to Budd and asked about the plane. And Budd said, well, if it's late, let's call the FAA. And he called the FAA, and he told the Boston Globe that the FAA was really rude to him, and they did not want to hear about